Hello, welcome back to the Everything is Black and White podcast. As always, sponsored by NordVPN. A huge thanks to Nord for backing the show and for their exclusive discount offer on a NordVPN plan, which you can get by clicking the link in the podcast description box. If you want to be secure while online, then NordVPN is for you. And the monthly cost is less than what you pay for a high street cup of coffee. No risk of the 30-day money-back guarantee. I'm Andrew Musgrove. I'm joined by Mark Quillers as we look back on a superb night for Newcastle United in Paris against PSG. The Magpies drew 1-1 with the champions of Europe and may have headed back to Tyneside feeling disappointed to only have grabbed a point. It was a performance of heart and spirit, but more importantly, it was a show and a reminder what a great manager Eddie Howe is. In recent weeks, he's been, and to a degree, rightly questioned about his setup and formation and his unwillingness to change from the tried and tested. But on Wednesday night in Paris, he proved all that to be false. A bold move to go with three centre-backs flanked by two wing-backs to essentially remove the width, and he looked to stifle one of the best sides in the world. It was bold, it was brave, but it was all well planned and, more importantly, well executed. There will, of course, be questions. Why against PSG can that performance be put in? Why in the Champions League can Newcastle United do that? While in the Premier League, they continue to stutter after false starts. And those questions are valid, but there's also huge praise needed for Eddie Howe, his staff, and the players who reminded everyone of what a good side they can be and what a good side they are. Mark, welcome back. You all good?
I am. Just about recovered from a little bit of a bug that I've had. Seems to have gone through the house, but was heartened by last night, by the performance.
Yes, it was a good performance. Sum up initially then your thoughts before we take a deep dive into it.
Yeah, I think I've said this before, but there's kind of a tendency in modern day society to jump to the negatives, and I think there is probably a desire to do that from some, and talk about missing out on the top 8 and drop points at Marseille and Leverkusen. But I think we need to look at the bigger picture here. Newcastle United have qualified for the knockout stages of the Champions League for the first time in their history, with a slight caveat of the 2003 season when they got into the second group phase, as it was then. They finished a point behind Real Madrid, a point behind the most successful club team in Europe in this season's Champions League. They finished ahead of Juventus. They finished ahead of a whole host of Champions League stalwarts. And they've got what I would consider to be, and I know we'll go on and talk about this, a winnable playoff round tie to set up a last 16 game against either Chelsea or Barcelona. I don't want to talk about negatives. I know we kind of have to, but I think there's just so many positives to come from last night and from this Champions League campaign. I've got to be honest, Newcastle have kind of done what I thought they would. They've won the games I thought they'd win. They've lost the ones I thought they'd lose, and they've got through. And I think they deserve, given the sort of season it's been, I think Eddie Howe, Jason Tindall, and the players deserve a lot of credit for getting through.
Certainly so. Let's start with the team news. We've called for change and something new. I have to say, I didn't expect it to happen in Paris. 5 changes: Jacob Ramsey, Dan Burn, Nick Voldemort, Joe Willock, and Anthony Langer, and a system change as well. We mentioned then Newcastle United going to a 3-4-2-1 with Lewis Miley and Lewis Hall deployed as the wing backs. We'll get into individuals and their performances in a moment, Mark. But just talk to me about this change in formation and your thoughts when you saw that team news drop.
Yeah, there was a few people said that they thought it was maybe Eddie prioritising other competitions, knowing Newcastle were more than likely going to get through regardless. But I just saw it as he felt the need to freshen up. He felt the need for more legs in midfield. And what I would say is that, and I know you've asked about the team selection, I did kind of feel as if that back three in the first 15, 20 minutes just didn't quite work. I thought the space between each of them was just too big. They were getting dragged far too easily. Same with the wing backs, it just didn't quite work for them either, and there was just holes all over the place, which is why PSG got off to the start that they did, added to the fact they're a very, very, very good side. But I think Newcastle deserve a lot of credit for resolving those issues so quickly, because that game, I'm fairly certain the same as you, we would have been sitting there watching the game, with our hands over our eyes, because it was just so. I mean, it could have got out of hand in the opening 15-20. But then when Newcastle, just a little kind of tactical tweak, not even a tactical tweak, just sort of a positional tweak, we'll call it. And then all of a sudden, they looked a bit more solid and they started playing out from the back. What I do think is we see just how important Dan Burn is when he's in there. Because I thought as a leader last night, he was incredible. The two wing-backs played really well once they got to grips with two very tricky wingers. It's funny, isn't it? Because I think when Kvaratskhelia went off, you're thinking, oh, thank God for that, because you know what he can do. And then they bring on Desiree Doué, and you're like, well, okay. So fair play to Lewis Hall and Louis Miley for their performances against, three very, very good wingers. And I think, Eddie, in terms of the tactics, we've both been critical of his tactics at times of the season. We spoke about the need to maybe play Voldemort and Wissa together. So when you heard there was going to be a tactical change, you thought, okay, maybe this is it. I'm not sure why now, but I thought you got it bang on. I thought the tactics worked brilliantly.
Yeah, me too. And the reaction was funny, I felt, pre-game, because you had some who've labelled him too stubborn or unable to change, then criticise him for doing so, and shouts of what on earth has he done? He's throwing the game. Absolute nonsense. It just feels like sometimes Eddie Howe can't win. It was a risk, of course it was, but it would have been a calculated one where they've done the work on the training ground. They've researched the best way to get at PSG, and it worked well. And I think aside from the effectiveness of it, it's just something new on the eye. It's just something different, and that gives fans hope. And you sit up and you take notice. You look at it and you're intrigued. And yeah, you might think, oh my goodness, we're going to maybe get a batter on you. But it's got your attention. It's not the same formation that we've seen largely used over the last 18 months. It just creates that different feeling, I think, within a spectator, within a fan. And that's very welcome. And then on top of that, as we've said, it's worked. So all for it. That being said, that hope that I'm talking about kind of was instantly snuffed out within the first few moments of the game, thanks to VAR. I mean, what is it with the Parc des Princes and unjust penalties? Lewis Miley judged to have handled the ball after it comes off Barcola and onto his hand. Total accident. Nothing he can do about it. And then to top it all off, Marquinhos handles the ball in the PSG box later in the half and nothing gets done. Both not penalties, but it just shows the total lack of consistency with officiating. Often in the Champions League, we talk about this being the standard of where Premier League and VAR needs to get to. Well, not on Wednesday night. Both the officiating on the pitch and in the VAR control room was an absolute disgrace. Thankfully, Pope saves the penalty early on, but let's be honest, he shouldn't have needed to. It wasn't a penalty.
Yeah, I don't really see how the handball when it hit Barcola, how that can't be a handball, yet Louis Miley's can. And if Louis Miley's is, then I also don't see why Marquinhos, when he handballed it, isn't. So you're right to call out the lack of consistency. I mean, let's be honest, we're all still stinging from what happened last time to Tino Livramento at PSG. So to see it happen again, and let's be honest, it wasn't even the worst decision in the game, because the yellow card given to Anthony Elanga was the worst decision I've ever seen in my life. He got a yellow card for winning the ball and being fouled. Unless he said something. I think that was said in commentary. And even then I was like, well, he hasn't even spoke the referee. But unless he has said something we haven't seen or heard, just bemusing. The referee, I thought, last night just had a really poor game and looked, how can I put this without getting sued?
Out of his depth.
Yeah, looked out of his depth, looked a bit overawed by PSG as European champions and everything that comes with them. And I'm not doing this as like this, oh, look at us, little old Newcastle, anything like that. Just felt as if we were on the wrong end of, yes, there were big decisions, but felt as if we came out on the wrong end of a lot of minor decisions as well. And really, really questionable display, we'll call it.
Great save, though, from Nick Pope.
Unbelievable.
But then PSG get the opener a few minutes later. A shot from Vitinha from the edge of the box, and it's a lovely finish. But it is time for my bi-weekly rant about Newcastle United's defending. Firstly, this comes from Lewis Hall miscontrolling the ball on halfway, and I suppose there's nothing you can do about individual mistakes. They will happen. But then PSG head up the pitch, and by the time Vitinha is given the ball, he's one of 3 PSG players on the edge of the box, unmarked. Jacob Ramsey nowhere to be seen, Joe Willock nowhere to be seen, and Santinelli only comes into shot just as the ball is about to be hit. And I get it, look, first 10 minutes, Newcastle United, as you've said, Mark, looked like a side getting to grips with a new formation against a really good team. But defending like that only makes that task harder. And it doesn't matter what formation you play. It's a game-by-game occurrence with Newcastle United of players not marking, not tracking, and giving people time and space to pick their spot. And don't get me wrong at all, ladies and gents. This, for the large part, was a fantastic performance by Newcastle United. And there's a whole bunch of positives to talk about. But I'm not going to sit here and let those positives rub away a shocking bit of defending, which is happening every single week. Quite simply, it's just not good enough.
How many times have we had this conversation about midfield? I mean, even when it is the big 3, if you want to call them that, when they're in there, just not tracking. And it's one of the basic things as a midfielder when you up against it. You track your runners, you prevent space or deny space for opposition. I've got to be honest, and Shay Given said this as well, so I'll back it up with someone who is firmly in the know. There were a little question mark over Nick Pope. Could he have got something on it? I think maybe he's moved his legs a bit quicker. I mean, it's a good strike from a very, very, for me, one of the best midfielders in the world. But my initial thought was, could he have maybe done a little bit better? But again, I will say, Shay Given did say that as well. Yeah, it just didn't feel like a good goal all round, but also felt sort of symptomatic of would chaos be an oversell? Maybe would be, wouldn't it? The sort of the opening 15 minutes, what went on with Newcastle, it didn't feel as if they were comfortable with the kind of setup that was there. They were still getting to grips with it. And I just felt all of that came together in that goal, and maybe mentally we're still recovering from the penalty as well, and everything that went on with that.
But please, Eddie, if you're watching, Jason, if you're watching, if you're listening, please get your midfielders to track the men. I don't want to come here on Monday and Liverpool have beaten Newcastle by 1-0, and it's because someone like McAllister or Salah has been allowed to wander in unmarked, because I'm not sure how many times I can survive this on a weekly basis. So please follow your men, for goodness sake, because Dembele, just after that goal, very nearly gets a second. It's a great save by Nick Pope, but guess what happens, Mark? He's not followed.
I know.
So simple. But let's give a bit of credit to Newcastle. After there was kind of 15, 20 minutes, they seemed to get more comfortable, looked more confident, more assured, and then they get the equaliser on the stroke of half-time. Joe Willock scores, and he needed that. Me and you both a little bit shocked that he's still here at Newcastle United. We thought he would go in this window. For him to be dropped into that side, given the form that he's in, on the biggest stage, massive opportunity, maybe a little bit daunting. It's a really nice header for him. He showed desire to get there ahead of anybody else. But on a whole, a really good performance from him. 100% dribble success, 3 out of 3. 5 out of 6 ground duels won. Okay, his passing could have been a little bit better. But as Eddie Howe said, he looked like the Joe Willock of old, full of energy, full of purpose, full of drive. And I guess, Mark, the hope is, a little bit like Newcastle United, that this isn't just a little reminder of what they are and what they can be. It's actually a building block to better things on a more consistent basis.
Yeah, look, I think had things been different in terms of Joelinton and Bruno, then there was probably still a slight chance that, come 7 o'clock on Monday, that Joe Willock would be a Newcastle player. I think there was still that chance. But the injury to Bruno, certainly the injury to Joelinton, means it's just not going to happen now. So I think he deserves massive credit for getting himself mentally in a place where he could perform on one of the biggest stages. There was a couple of runs last night when, the Joe Willock of old came through, when he actually left mid. And I never think he looks like a quick runner because of his action, his running style. He doesn't look quick, but he is, because he just strides away from players. It's like a long-distance runner, isn't he, in that sense? Now, his finish, it's probably the first time we've seen him in a long time actually break into the area and do that. That was like one of the goals that he had when he had that initial loan spell, when he scored, what was it, 8 games in a row, something like that, 7 or 8 games in a row. He was scoring goals like that then, and he was just right place, right time. It's a really good header as well. I mean, you'd expect him to finish it, but it's a really good header. And it felt as if the confidence as the game went on grew and grew and grew, probably in Joe Willock more than any other player on the pitch. And I thought he deserved a lot of credit for sticking at it and really, at times, putting PSG on the back foot.
Can he kick on? Because that's only his 19th goal for Newcastle United. So that shows you he's not lived up to that first campaign on loan. And I get it. It was something special. He's never going to be able to replicate that, but still 19 goals in his time on Tyneside. And that's not good enough for a man who cost a pretty penny and who's got clear ability. Is this just a little flash in the pan, a little reminder of what he can be in a few weeks' time? Because he's likely to have played a lot of football over the coming month. Well, it won't be me because I'll be on paternity, but will you be sitting here saying, he hasn't kicked on from that night in Paris?
There's only one person can answer that, and there's only one way it can be answered, which is it's down to Joe Willock now. If Joe Willock wants to become a regular feature of Newcastle United's midfield, then he's given himself the chance to be. And by the way, I would say the same with Jacob Ramsey, who I thought had his best game for the club by quite some distance last night. So the injuries that have gone on in midfield, the fact they are going to have to rotate more and more in these next sort of 28, 29 days, the chance is there for both of them. But probably more so Joe Willock, because I feel as if he really has something to prove now. Now, he's gone some way to doing that with that goal. Give himself a platform. Can you build on it? It's down to one person now, and that's Joe Willock.
I mentioned Jacob Ramsey there. I think Eddie Howe said it was his best outing for the midfielder. And over recent games, every single week, he seems to be getting better and better. I think the thing that stands out is his calmness on the ball. He just seems to be able to take control of it. Still looks like a player who needs a little bit more confidence when he does get into the final third. He had that effort that was saved by the keeper, and that's what we need to see more of him. Just the willingness and the confidence to actually take on a shot in a dangerous area. But certainly his best performance. And do you think he's looking like the midfielder Newcastle United spent all that money on?
Starting to. I think it's one of them where you probably learnt this about me, haven't you? That you just don't get too carried away just yet. But what I have seen is a player that, as you said there quite correctly, looks calmer on the ball, made the right runs going forward. But also what we found last night was he was kind of having to probably play a bit more of a disciplined role than what Eddie Howe would like to give him because of what was available. And he had to play a little bit deeper with Sandro Tonali, who did go forward a bit. Tonali tried to get forward, but the two of them worked quite nicely. They kind of dovetailed, didn't they? If one of them went, the other one stayed, and it worked quite nicely. I'm sorry to link it into another player, but I kind of feel with Ramsey, if we won't see the best of him until maybe he gets his first goal. Just that kind of mental barrier. And I feel it's like the same with Anthony Elanga. And I thought he did well last night in spells. Once they get the first goals and they get that little mental block gone, we'll then see the best of both players.
Yeah, fingers crossed that happens sooner rather than later. You've spoken about Dan Burn in the just previously there, Mark, and I mean, what a return to the side. Let's not forget the injury he had, a punctured lung, and he's back quicker than most. Puts in a man of the match performance, leadership, communication, just looks so solid at centre back, and he obviously wins man of the match, as we've said there. A brilliant return for him.
Yeah, look, I listened to an interview with Dan on another podcast. I don't know if we'll be able to mention it. I won't, just in case you threaten us. But
was it Dr. Geordies by any chance?
It was, yes, it was.
Yeah, everyone go over to the Dr. Geordies. Andy's a lovely bloke. Go over and watch it. I don't mind that.
Good, that's fine. That's just because I know, just in case. It's very territorial.
He's more a neighbour than a rival. It's fine. Go over and watch it. He's watched us.
Yeah, seriously, if anyone gets a chance to listen or watch it, do it, because I listened to it yesterday afternoon when I was working, and I came out of it thinking, like, I would absolutely love to play on the same side as Dan Burn, because if you need someone to put the head in where it hurts, or to put that tackle in that. Look, in my day, which was a long time ago, when I was a winger who wouldn't tackle, couldn't tackle his way out of a wet paper bag. I would love to have played with someone like a Dan Burn who would just do the gritty stuff, the nasty stuff, but also the way he spoke. Like, I understand why Eddie Howe a couple of times has asked him to give a team talk, whether it's pre-match or post-match, because listening to him, I was like, yeah, I'd go into battle with him, absolutely. And I think I saw that last night where he gave Newcastle a lovely balance in the back three. And by the way, the three of them were unbelievable, I thought. Chow and Botman again. Botman's form in recent weeks has been exceptional. Now, Bird, there was one point in the second half where Bedman, who's playing left centre-back, all of a sudden has gone charging up this run in the left wing. That was the biggest sign of how confident Newcastle were, because all of a sudden, one of your centre-backs is playing essentially as a left winger. And I just thought he was incredible. We've spoken a little bit about England. I know we don't do it too much. But it's performances like that will see him in the England World Cup squad. I've got no doubt about that.
Gotta be honest, it makes us nervous when I see him do that. It really, really does. But I get the point you're making. And it was a great return for Dan Burn. And I guess in many ways, Mark, obviously the window is coming to a close. And the only real position Newcastle United have been linked to is a defender. But Dan Burn coming back right now at this point in January, it probably, and this won't go down well with everyone, but it probably removes the need for Newcastle United to go into the transfer market, at least for that additional centre-back with Burn coming back to fitness. So it saves them a few pennies which can be spent in the summer.
Yeah, I think in the next few weeks you're expected to have Emil Kraft come back, unless he leaves before Monday. Obviously, there is interest. Livramento's not too far behind him. So, and then you've got Shaw, I think, is March, April. So there is a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. Personally, I would still like to see another defender come in, but I think if someone does, and again, I agree it's unlikely, it'll be a long-term signing. I don't think it'll be someone that's a kind of loan at the end of the season, or a kind of 30-odd-year-old coming in for 18 months. I think it'll be a 19, 20, 21-year-old who'll come in to challenge for a place next season and beyond. So there is a need for a left-back as cover for Lewis Hall, I think, or competition. But also, I think you might well see someone who can play as a centre-back as well, sort of left-sided centre-back. So it's really interesting. But yeah, I agree. I'd be surprised if anyone comes in now. I think players will leave. I still think there's a chance Jamal Lascelles goes before Monday's deadline. You may well see a couple of under 21s go. Obviously, we're seeing a few of them go. There's still interest in a couple of those. So yeah, really interesting to see how things pan out over the next few days. But I agree, Burn coming back probably lessens that need or desire to bring in another centre-back.
I mean, obviously, we'd all like to see new arrivals. But as you said, if someone does come in, it's going to be a youngster who is going to develop. But if the window closes and that left-back cover hasn't come in, they haven't gone and got that young centre-back that's been talked about, have they got enough? Obviously, you can't put your money on who will get injured and what have you. But with everyone back, say within a month's time, Livramento, Emil Kraft, have they got enough to get through? And not only get through, but hopefully excel.
Yeah, I personally still think they need a long-term left-back cover and competition. So I'd like to see that happen now, if I'm honest. I don't know who that is. I know obviously there's links with various players across the continent. And I think that should happen before Monday. I don't think it will. Is it just if I was Newcastle, I would do it now if the right player's available, because I don't want Tino Livramento to be left-back cover. I want him to be first-choice right-back and focused on that. I get it, and I think there is an argument to say that he's at times been better at left-back, but I want him to be first-choice right-back and focused on that because that's his position. And then you have Trippier as cover, and you have Kraft possibly as cover if he stays. I've never been a fan of players being shoehorned into positions. They're more comfortable when they're in the natural positions, and I think that's what Newcastle need.
Which leads us full circle to Dan Burn.
Yes.
Look, every bit of an England international World Cup squad member at centre-back. And I'm keeping everything crossed that Lewis Hall stays fit for Lewis Hall, because he also, if he does, will be England's first choice left back, but also for Dan Burn, because if Lewis Hall stays fit, Dan Burn will not be playing left back, and that is a good thing for everybody concerned. It's now just a question of, can he oust Botman at the left-sided centre-back? Does Eddie Howe stick with 3 at the back? I think he might do for the game against Liverpool. But what they've got now is 3 competitive centre-backs going for 2 spaces, maybe 3. We'll wait and see on that, but at least Dan Burn won't be playing left-back.
Can I just make a point on Lewis Hall? He is England's best left-back, right? He's better than Luke Shaw. He's better than Miles Lewis-Skelly. He is currently England's best left-back. He has to start at the World Cup. If he stays fit between now and the end of the season, he has to start, not be a squad member. He has to start as England's left-back. Since he's come back in the side, he's been as good as I've seen. And I told you this before we started recording. It's 38 years tomorrow since I saw my first Newcastle United game. He's the best left-back I've seen in that time. Now, I wouldn't say Newcastle have always been blessed with great left-backs. You know, I look at my time watching the club, and it's the likes of your John Beresford was incredible for a small spell. David Santon was very good at left-back. You know, you've had Ollie Bernard, people like that. Lewis Hall is the best one they've had by quite some distance. And I think I would have absolutely no issues, as someone who watches England, if he's got that number 3 shirt at the World Cup and he's playing left-back game in, game out, because he won't let England down. He's exactly the sort of fullback that Thomas Tuchel likes. Defensively, I think he's excellent. He's improved massively. Going forward, he's incredible. He can do the whole inverted wing-back thing when he comes into midfield and affects the game then. There was one point last night when he was playing right wing, and he came across the pitch and he was linking up with Miley on the right. I just think he's so good. And I'll say it again, he's England's best left-back.
Yeah, I think it's a given, if he stays fit, that he will be first choice. Interesting on Miley, because at the start, you praised Miley and you praised Hall, and I'm not going to go in as heavy on the praise on Miley. I think he really struggled in them opening 15 minutes until the back line as a whole got a little bit more in tune with itself. I felt it was a difficult evening for Lewis. He got better as the game went on, but he still found it rather difficult. But, you know, I think that might be a good thing. And you speak to people who've worked with him and who've trained with him, and the one thing they say is that, you know, he's so switched on, he's so modest, he's just the kind of everyday kind of guy. So there's no way that he will be getting complacent. So when I say this isn't me necessarily saying that he's getting too big for his boots after 6 weeks of, you would argue, man of the match performances in nearly every game. But at the same time, I think a performance where it's just maybe a little bit of shock to the system is just a good thing. I think for every player, just to wheel them back in, and just a little reminder that, you know, you're only as good as the next performance.
We shouldn't forget that it was another different position for Lewis Miley. You know, I know it's not a massive change, but it is a change. It's going from a right back to a right wing back when you are asked to take on more attacking responsibility as a right wing back, as well as looking after the defensive side of the game. Now, that's not easy to do both sides of it. And I think, yeah, again, just symptomatic of a little system change again, that everyone looked a bit uncomfortable during that opening period. But I agree again, I think Lewis Miley was excellent you didn't say excellent, but I will. Going forwards, after that first 20 minutes, I thought he got to grips and stuck to his task brilliantly against, you know, Bokola, Dembele, whoever played that side, because they did kind of get, I'm not going to say forced into a switch, but they tried to unlock Newcastle by switching wingers. It wasn't an easy night, but I'll tell you what, he'll be a better player for it.
Certainly so. And just the final question on England, and your answer now may change as the weeks and months go on, but is there a chance that what we saw from Newcastle in Paris against PSG and the players who performed, is there a chance that Newcastle could have 5 players in the England squad come the summer? Lewis Miley has been talked about. Dan Burn, obviously, I think if he stays fit and plays regular football, will be in. I think actually, even if he doesn't, I think he'll still go because Thomas Tuchel has talked about how he needs that personality in the dressing room. Lewis Hall, Anthony Gordon, Harvey Barnes. You could even say 6 with Nick Pope.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it'll happen. I think there's more likely we'll see Harvey Barnes wearing the blue of Scotland, but you never know. I've said it before. I think Lewis Miley will be a future England national. I've got no doubt about that. I said it one of the first times I watched him for the under-18s that I thought he had something there that could take him to the top level, and I've not really seen too much now to suggest that I would change that opinion. Will he go to the World Cup? It's highly unlikely. I don't think he'll even get a call up in the pre-tournament games from March onwards. But I'll tell you what, international football tends to work in cycles. So when the World Cup finishes, there will be the inevitable retirements. I imagine the likes of Jordan Henderson, maybe Harry Maguire. If they go to the World Cup, you'll see this will be their last tournaments. I can certainly see Lewis Miley being in that next cycle of players that will be brought in. And I think he'll fully deserve it as well. I think, again, I do try to not get carried away, you know that. But I think with Lewis Miley, I think given how much we love local players coming through, I think we can't afford to let ourselves get a little bit carried away because I think this is a very, very special talent that's coming.
Yeah, well, let's wait and see what happens. Back to the action on the pitch, the changes did come. Gordon and Barnes introduced, and they caused problems. Gordon, particularly down the left, really looked impressive. They couldn't handle his pace. And I was really intrigued by the way Newcastle set up because we've spoken for the last few episodes about how whoever plays up top needs the wingers to be closer to them. And I think the initial setup was very much that. Obviously, didn't really have the width. But even when Gordon and Barnes came on, more Barnes than Gordon, but they were still much closer to Wissa in this instance. I think that really made a difference. Now, it's all about how Barnes and Gordon can adapt to that, and Langer as well, because obviously, what they do really well is hug the touchline and then take it around the defender and beat them in a foot race. But as we've said for the last kind of 6 weeks, you've got to kind of get the best out of your striker. And if that means pushing your wingers into an unfamiliar position, then I'm all for that. And I actually think it worked really, really well. And Newcastle did look a little bit more threatening when Gordon and Barnes came on, but again, it was in that narrow kind of passage on the pitch rather than being pushed out on the wings. Do you think we'll see more of that going forward? Is that the best way to get the best out of Voldemort and Wissa, do you think?
I actually would have left Voldemort on last night. I don't think I would have brought Wissa on, if I'm honest, because I thought Voldemort probably isn't as good in the air as he should be when a ball goes into him. But I felt last night just his presence was hampering PSG, and it was allowing players to get in around him. Now, he didn't win every header, but there was times, if you watched it, where PSG didn't even challenge for the header. They were just focusing on the second ball, and it kind of forced them back. But I think, look, we've said this pretty much since Nick Voldemort has come in the club, that players need to get in and around him. You can't expect him to hold the ball up against two centre-backs on his own. And Newcastle did that reasonably well last night. I agree, Gordon and Barnes coming on, they look more of a threat. I think both players probably should have, certainly Barnes, should have scored. Gordon, it's incredible, isn't it? Because in the Premier League, he's been below par. But there's just something in the Champions League seems to bring out the best in him. He seems to relish that challenge. Now, I don't know what you put that down to. I'm not going to question his motivation because that's really... You can't question the motivation of a Premier League footballer, because if you question the motivation, if they didn't have motivation, they wouldn't be playing the Premier League. Simple as that. So, I don't know what you put it down to. Maybe it is. I think there probably is something in what he said before the game when he spoke about the style of football in the Champions League. I think he's probably got a very good point in that. And he probably said it because he knows that it suits his game more, if that's how the game is in the Champions League. So, yeah, I think going forwards, Newcastle have kind of given themselves a bit of a blueprint. And, we always say, don't we, that Eddie Howe's big on trust. he now knows that his players can play that formation against the very best. Because let's be honest, they've drawn with the Champions League winners, the best team in Europe by quite some distance last season. If they can do it against them, then logic says they should be able to do it against anyone. However, you know what's coming next. Football isn't logical, is it? Let's be honest. But at least they've shown they can do it. So I think it'll be really interesting, possibly against your likes of your Man Cities, maybe even Saturday against Liverpool, that you may well see a similar system utilised. My only concern I think I would have, I'd be worried about a midfield of Tonali and Ramsey getting overrun in the Premier League, because there are midfield duos or trios in the Premier League that I think would pick holes in that too.
The midfield's been picked apart pretty much every game and defensively.
This is true.
And Barnes, that chance at the end. I mean, look, he's forced to get out into a good save. Then he's had that chance at the end. It's a lot harder than it looks. I think the ball is spinning. I don't think he's anticipated it, which is his own fault. And he's really close to the goal. And it's not an easy tap in that. He's off balance. Should he score? Yes, but it's a really difficult chance. And, you know, I didn't watch it, and it didn't instantly go at the top of me. That's a sitter miss. You know, Joe Willock won a few weeks back. That was a sitter. Gordon's had two against Chelsea, and I think it was Bournemouth as well. They were more sitters. They were easier chances. This one is not as easy as some people are making it out to be. But Newcastle, you know, arguably should have won that game. The second half, they were much, much better. The only side that looked like they were going to get another goal, and it just gives you hope about what's to come. It is important, though, I think, to keep calm, Mark. As always with social media, there's been kind of an extreme reaction to what we saw. I mean, was it one of the best performances without picking up a victory? Certainly so. It was a great display from Newcastle United. As you mentioned, heart, desire, a game plan, a different game plan, executed perfectly. But I think it's also right again to raise that question about why against PSG? Why in the Champions League? Contrasted to what happened on Sunday against Villa, nowhere near what will happen against Liverpool, who haven't won in January in the Premier League. Is it the doctor prescribes Newcastle United to remedy that? Potentially. Watch out for the match preview and view from the opposition coming up later in the week. I think it's right to be positive about what we saw on Wednesday, and it's right to be happy with the performance, and it's right to be excited about a trip to Monaco or Karabakh, wherever it may be. But I go back to what I've said so often after PSV, after Man City, which I firmly believe was the best performance of the season, the one that Newcastle won, and one of the best performances under Eddie Howe. It's right to ask, how do you do it for certain games, for certain competitions, against certain players, against certain managers? Where is the consistency? And I think that's the important thing. You can only really celebrate this resultant performance if in a month's time, Newcastle United have got on a great run in the Premier League, have pushed City as close as they can do, hopefully won the second leg, are still in the FA Cup after beating Aston Villa. Because a little bit like Joe Willock, I don't want to be sitting there and looking back and thinking, look what he did in Paris and look what they haven't done since. And I hope that doesn't come across too negative. In my mind, it's throwing the gauntlet down and saying, this is what you've done. You've proven what you can be. Let's go and do it on a consistent basis, because Champions League qualification's still there. Trip to Wembley is still on the cards. Let's go and do it, but it's down to the players, it's down to the gaffer to find that consistency. Otherwise, the performance and result on Wednesday, as negative as it might sound to some, is just that in isolation. And we can't be having that.
But it's not negative. It's what you've done is you've given balance, which is what I was talking about a couple of weeks ago, where, you know, can you say Newcastle have been poor for large parts this season? Yes. Can you say there's been some very, very good performances this season? Yes. Can you say, Eddie Howe deserves credit for things like last night? Absolutely. But can he be questioned for other decisions earlier in the season? 100%. Like, it's about giving balance. contrary to the name of the podcast, not everything is black and white. Really, let's be honest. So I just think as long as you're balanced in your... So again, I'll go back to what I've seen on some, and I'll say a minority of social media things posted last night about should have gotten the top 8. Like, yeah, maybe, because they've dropped points away by Leverkusen, they dropped points away at Marseille from winning positions. Obviously, it's frustrating. But then I think if you went back to August and said, their Newcastle's group or league phase fixtures, they're going to finish a point behind Real Madrid. They're going to finish above Juventus. They're going to set themselves into a playoff round tie with Monaco or Karabakh. Would you have taken that? I'd argue 99.9% Newcastle fans would have. It's a difficult competition, and every single point counts. Yes, it's frustrating that we know we should have had more. Newcastle could have finished where Tottenham are or Liverpool are in this table. But it's another step forward in this journey that we're on. And I hate talking about stuff like journeys and all this and evolution and all that. But it's true. Since the new owners have come in, we can't even call them new owners anymore, but since the owners have come in, Newcastle have gone from pretty much being relegated to in the playoffs in the Champions League with a chance of playing Barcelona in the last 16. So it's another step forward. And I think we just have to appreciate that. This season could still be very special. It could still be, well, I'm not going to say horrendous, but it could still be a frustrating season. We could end up missing out in Europe. They could end up winning nothing. They could end up 10th in the table. But there has been progress made in some aspects, and it would be foolish to ignore that. Now, what I do think there is a need to do next, and I mentioned this a few weeks back, there is a need for some big decisions in the transfer market in the summer. And I know we're not trying to look too far ahead, but we have to. There are going to be some players that will naturally come to the end of the time at the club. And I think this may well be the summer. To go back to what you said before about not spending over the next 3-4 days, I think there has to be not necessarily a big spend, but there has to be a successful spend where there are signings come in where you just go, that's exactly what they need.
Mm.
You know, I think they need another striker. Go and get a proven striker. Do we need another midfielder? Go and get a proven midfielder. You know, someone who's done it at the top end of the game. Now, that doesn't always mean spending 60, 70, 80 million. You could probably go and get one for 25 million who's maybe coming towards the end of his contract. And I think that's what they'll do. They'll look towards those players with like 12 months left on their current deals. So I'm starting to look towards what's the next step for PIF in Newcastle United. You know, we want more nights like last night. We want more seasons in the Champions League like this has been. What do we need to do to get to that? And I think that's why this summer, personally, I think is the biggest summer PIF have had since they've come to the club.
Well, let us know your answers to that question and Mark's focus on the summer. Pleasure, as always, Mark, talking to you about Newcastle United, and we await the draw, whether it'll be Monaco or Karabakh. Obviously, Monaco is the easier trip to get to, but both highly winnable, as Mark said there. Big thanks to you guys for watching and listening. Do get into the comments, do get involved, and let us know your thoughts on anything that we've discussed today. And remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you get the moment to do so. It's free and just means you get a notification every time we upload a new episode. And thanks to you guys for listening on the audio-only platform. Your support, as always, is greatly appreciated. Do check out the match preview with John Gibson and the view from the opposition with Paul Ghost from the Liverpool Echo coming up before Newcastle head down to Anfield in the Premier League. And all being well, I'll see you on Monday with Mark.